Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh.
And Patty XRP.
And today, I'm going to do an overview of what DeFi 2.0 is and the wave of new projects testing liquidity mining alternatives. I'm going to touch on DAOs and the future in the crypto markets. So DeFi 2.0 is going to be a phrase or term that's going to start getting thrown around a lot in the next couple of months. So really, what is DeFi 2.0 and how is that going to affect the crypto markets is what we're going to go through today. So basically, this is going to change the landscape of crypto, but it's just an addition on top of what we have already. So it's not really going to be a replacement. So Patty, we're going to go through this article today that we found from Defiant, which I think is really well written and gives a broad overview of what DeFi 2.0 is.
Absolutely. So I can start us off. This is called DeFi 2.0 Wave of New Projects Tests Liquidity Mining Alternatives from Owen Furnow at the Defiant. And so with this, to start us off, so he says things aren't getting easier for those struggling to stay current with a lightning quick DeFi space. Just when you think you're up to speed with the latest token or protocol, something new comes along. Brace yourself, because here comes DeFi 2.0. And what that exactly means is still in flux. And I'm sure, like all things in crypto, that's going to evolve over time. So while the meaning is congealing, a core component of DeFi's next evolution includes alternatives to a mainstay of DeFi 1.0, which is liquidity mining. And liquidity mining, if you're unaware, this is where you provide liquidity to DEX or an AMM, and you are able to use the LP tokens to basically mine for an extra token so that you can earn higher yield on what you're doing. So projects like Olympus DAO, Fei Protocol, and Alchemix are all experimenting with new ways of capturing users with the new challenge of getting them to stay. The new crop of DeFi projects centers around the idea called protocol controlled liquidity, or PCV. This entails projects acquiring funds to support their financial applications rather than tapping users' funds by enticing them with liquidity mining rewards. And here they have a quote from Tyler Reynolds where it says, DeFi 2.0 is mostly about DAOs changing the relationship between capital providers and the protocol itself. So Mickey, I'll let you jump in at this point.
Yeah, so this is a totally new concept and construct that's come around here, is that the protocol could actually own the LP tokens for a pool. So for example, say there was a token trading against USDC, that protocol would actually own the LP token. So then the protocol would earn fees from that actual pool of liquidity instead of renting it out and then incentivizing those to provide liquidity and paying out their native token. They're able to own liquidity. So this works in some projects. Now, liquidity mining is still going to be used and is necessary depending on the individual project. So some of the newer projects, if you're familiar with, is like Olympus DAO and Klima, they need that liquidity for their project to get going. And they're bootstrapping off of, say, SushiSwap or bootstrapping off of a Uniswap to use those liquidity pools and those other protocols. And that's something you don't necessarily need in Flare Finance, since it's a whole infrastructure and it has its own automated market maker DEX. So this is kind of an addition, and it's still evolving. So I just want to throw in here quick of how rapidly the pace of innovation is in the DeFi space, because there's no speed limits. Things are just moving at a blazing speed. It just, as innovation goes, it's going. Since everything is open source and everyone could interact with an internet connection, there's no speed limit, and things are just at warp speed. They're moving. So we're going to see more and more composability as the infrastructures of DeFi and now the blockchains are built out. Like Ethereum, it's no longer that you have to be on Ethereum to do DeFi. Now there's 10 other layer 1 protocols that are all accessible through MetaMask and other Web3 wallets to connect all these different DeFi applications that are built on top. So this is a big change from, say, a year and a half ago when DeFi summer really kicked off. And in the article, we're going to talk about that a little more, of how we're only really 18 months in to this DeFi summer. So when we talk about cycles, this cycle and Bitcoin halving was kicked off by which Compound started with liquidity mining. That's what kicked things off. So keeping in mind where this cycle began, I think is very important. And that's why comparing it to 2017, 2018 is a waste of time. I don't care what the charts say. This started in a completely different environment for a completely different reason. And we're seeing a totally different environment here. The tokens that are getting utility, that have demand, that have liquidity outside of just central exchange listings are really starting to explode and gain in value. And moving on, Patty, you can take us into the next section.
Absolutely. So here's a quote from the founder of Alchemix, and he says, "Profit taking is expected, but when a giant player comes in and exclusively dumps the governance token, it creates a dynamic where all price appreciation is nullified." And so Alchemix is an auto-paying loan app, and also their founder is a critic of excessive liquidity mining. He also adds, "This depresses the community and convinces them to do the same, or else they won't ever be able to realize their gains." So, in a nutshell, liquidity mining involves protocols giving their native tokens to users in exchange for depositing assets that other users can borrow or trade, and that's generally done through like an AMM DEX like Uniswap or SushiSwap. The problem is that protocols are watering down their token supply in exchange for capital deposits, which are often temporary. So people come in, lend their assets to the protocol while milking its rewards, then leave with both the assets and rewards, leaving the protocol high and dry. There are countless examples of this phenomena. A project called Big Data Protocol attracted over 6 billion in total value locked during a 6-day stretch of liquidity mining rewards, only to fall to a current level of only 3.1 million, which, I mean, that's kind of mind blowing how
That's
low that
massive.
fell. Yeah, I mean, you
Wow.
can see the chart. So, you know, in this instance, I'm sure that they were paying extremely high APY rewards out the gate. And people that are, you know, yield farmers, that's a term out in the space now, will just come in and they'll stay for the super high APY. Once that's going to start going away, you know, they're all just going to exit as quickly as possible. So to move on down here, sometimes liquidity mining programs aren't so short lived. Compound Finance, a lender and pioneer of the liquidity mining model, as Mickey mentioned, was net negative when subtracting liquidity mining from protocol revenue as of July 15th, according to a graph posted from Andrew Kang of Mechanism Capital. Compound has a long-term and ongoing liquidity mining program with its comp token. So you can see, so these are for money markets like Compound, Aave, and Cream, and it
Mm-hmm.
tells you the net daily protocol revenue here. So Compound is this green line, and you can see it has not been going great in terms of earning daily revenue for the protocol.
Yeah. So one thing that's uniquely different about Compound compared to, say, liquidity mining is they're paying rewards out for lending and borrowing. So if you are a borrower, you're still earning rewards. So Compound did that to kind of get their governance token out there. So those who are participating in the actual lending and borrowing of the money market account, right, they're able to earn comp tokens. So this is where the distribution of that token keeps coming out. So the traders of comp, it's introducing more supply. So this is why a lot of these tokens move up in market cap, but they're not moving up in actual value of their token because those are accumulating more of it. So this incentivizes, I think, more people to be in the project. But Compound was the one to kick this off. So they kicked off, and that's Robert Leshner, who presented at Ripple Swell recently. So they're basically the founding fathers of DeFi, and it got it going. But it shows here how it's still net negative, Patty. So I think that's interesting, from a viewpoint of a year and a half. But at the same time, how much billions of dollars is locked in Compound now? A lot.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I think going through this isn't to say that liquidity mining isn't effective, because I think certainly it can be. It's just, you know, are there other ways of doing things for protocols over the long haul? And, you know, that's what individual projects are kind of testing out right now. So to move on further with this, regardless of duration, liquidity mining is a questionable choice that dilutes a project's supply and attracts mercenary capital, as Big Data Protocols program exemplifies. So, what's this got to do with DeFi 2.0? Well, there's a swath of projects eschewing liquidity mining and experimenting with alternatives. Olympus DAO, which I'm sure many people have heard of at this point, is a project aiming to offer what the project calls on its website a decentralized reserve currency in its own token. Additionally, Olympus DAO sells its token at a discount in exchange for tokens like DAI, which is a stable coin from MakerDAO. They take in liquidity provider tokens, which include OHM in them, so that they can own liquidity for OHM within their protocol's treasury. So, for example, a user could trade their OHM DAI LP token, which represents a liquidity position in the decentralized exchange SushiSwap, for the actual OHM token at a discount. So you can imagine basically like Olympus DAO would say, hey, if you give us an OHM DAI LP token, then we'll give you whatever that's worth. We'll give you a 5% discount on OHM. So you're able to get 5% extra OHM than if you just bought that OHM with the value you had provided liquidity to a pool with. So Olympus calls this mechanism a bond because the discount is paid out over 5 days. So over here, I think we already touched on that quote. So I'll let you hop in, Mickey.
Yeah, so in the past, there were a lot of these VCs. So that big data protocol, these VCs were like vultures. They'd invest into these protocols and then just pump their liquidity and move on from one project to the next. So I think this is where some of these projects like Olympus OHM have said, hey, we don't need VC investors to get this project up and running. We're just going to own our own liquidity. And they sell these bonds, which give a discount. Now, the higher the APY is on the bond, the more the discount. So there is a level there of how much the treasury needs, because we're going to get into it here with Olympus DAO, which I think if you haven't heard of, you should kind of do your own research on, and we'll cover more in the future. It is kind of at the forefront of the DeFi 2.0 landscape, and it is kind of making a lot of progress. I mean, they have almost $1 billion locked in just their treasury alone is really telling. And there's a lot of, let's go more into it now, Patty, because this paragraph covers it.
Yep. So it says this system has allowed Olympus to own its own liquidity, a major difference from projects which watch liquidity fade away as rewards run out. Olympus DAO's stats page says the protocol owns over 99% of the OHM DAI liquidity, and that liquidity isn't going anywhere because Olympus itself owns it and is earning LP fees with the LP tokens. So additionally here, Olympus has another innovative mechanism, a staking function which pays users an additional OHM tokens in exchange for locking the token up. This counteracts the sell pressure, which comes from users' ability to get OHM at a discount with bonds. Staking is working. Over 90% of OHM is staked today, according to the project's primary dashboard. So you can see, this is over the course of 3 months right here. It's stayed really stable above 90%. And that's how much OHM that's, out there is actually being staked. So moving on for the rest of this. So without liquidity mining and exemplifying the DeFi 2.0 movement, OHM has reached the 55th slot in market cap terms among all digital assets at over $2.9 billion in market cap value. Olympus recently launched Olympus Pro, which aims to become the new industry standard platform to help protocols acquire their own liquidity, as the project's docs say. Olympus Pro does this by offering a bonding service similar to the one it uses to acquire its own liquidity tokens. Other projects you could consider to be a part of DeFi 2.0 are hopping on board. This is Alchemix, Abracadabra, the stablecoin issuer gunning for MakerDAO, and others have elected to use Olympus Pro in efforts to control their own liquidity as part of DeFi's new wave. And Mickey, one thing I want to add here that I think is interesting is, the DAO component is really important here because it kind of allows a user base that forms a community around, an ecosystem or a protocol to do things in the future. As we learn more, there's better ways to do things or kind of addressing concerns with the project. So with that, this is one way that you could essentially own liquidity for the project if that's necessary. Also, this is a way where the protocol's owning these LP tokens. Now, they don't really care about impermanent loss or anything like that, because over time, and they're going to be holding these forever for the most part, the fees are going to stack up. Even if, the price of Ohm rises compared to DAI, for that specific liquidity pool position, it doesn't, it's still going to rise in value. So, they're buying something that can move up over time. It generates a yield for their treasury, which just helps the project more into the future. And it's kind of like, I think about these DAOs and communities that are forming. How can the protocol earn money for the community so that the community can either benefit from that or use it in some way in the future to add more to the protocol or attract more people there, whatever that may be. So I just think that's something that's going to be really important, where all these different networks, protocols built on top of them, dApps, where they can find ways to actually make revenue versus, like, the economies today, the governments are always running a deficit. So, like, what if we can make new economies where they're actually making profits? And that's way more of an incentive, I think, for people to want to stay within a protocol long term.
No, that's a great point you make there, Patty, is that these protocols are creating new types of economies that we haven't seen, but they're also using similar financial products like bonds, right? So they're able to issue something that we've known as a bond. You get a discount now on the purchase of those assets. And these decentralized DAOs, right? So it's a community driven. Everyone who owns the token has a vote. So this is kind of, they start off a lot of them anonymous because they're just creating a community. So there's no one entity behind the protocol, where an ICO, you would have to fund a whole project, then get it going. These are just spinning up very quickly, and the staking rewards are very high. So just to throw that out there, they don't mention it too much in this article, but the APYs are usually very high for Olympus Ohm, for Ohm example, when it came out, and that's to incentivize people to stake. And then over time, there's a progressive decrease in that APY as the token is distributed to the staking rewards, and it rebases like 3 times a day. So the yield that comes from them is very high. Now, Olympus has been out for almost 9 months now, so it's down to around 7,000% APY. And to some of you, that might sound ridiculously high, 7,000 APY, but it started at about 80,000 APY or so, and it's slowly come down as the tokens are distributed. And once there's 10 million tokens distributed, I believe it will come down to under 1,000% APY. And in the future, we'll do another video on this. I want to go to the newest things that have come with Ohm, because there is enhancements that have come to Olympus over the last months that are not covered in this article, but we'll save that for a future video. So let's talk about the rented liquidity, Patty.
Absolutely. So here it says protocol controlled value brings sustainability, so you can maintain the growth you had without hollowing out the community. And this is from the Alchemix founder. He also thinks protocol controlled value as another knob projects can use in addition to liquidity mining. There are other projects implementing the protocol controlled value model. The FEI protocol, which issues the FEI stablecoin, was one of the early pioneers and just launched a version 2. FEI's native tribe token is up over 40% in the last week, according to CoinGecko, when they wrote this in October. Additionally, DeFi 2.0 is mostly about DAOs, changing the relationship between capital providers and the protocol itself. The move in DeFi 2.0 is for protocols to own their own liquidity. Additionally, this contrasts to DeFi 1.0, where protocols earn TVL by providing the best user experience or rented liquidity via liquidity incentives. So this is actually an interesting part right here, Mickey, because, as Solana and Avalanche this past year have really taken off, obviously their TVL has exploded to, I think they might both be over tens of billions of dollars. So it will be interesting to see as other options come on board with Polkadot, Cardano, Flare Network, possibly side chains on the XRPL, and, anything else new that's coming out, how they will be able to retain the users there and the TVL they've gathered as more competition comes into the market. So, I think all of this is really a learning process and kind of figuring out what works best. And DeFi 2.0 is kind of focused on protocol owned liquidity to this point. But we'll see if it evolves into other things. There's tons of improvements that can constantly be made. So to go on farther here, other projects like Pod Finance and Options Protocol, which launched a couple of months ago, is offering NFTs to liquidity providers as an alternative to liquidity mining with fungible ERC20 rewards. That's interesting. I've definitely seen some other projects out there getting into offering NFTs for various different stuff. Flare Finance has the DeLorean NFT for their NFT marketplace, or like the Samurai NFT, which they've been giving out for people, if they test their protocol and meet certain requirements to earn that. That's a way to earn the yield of the protocol in the future. So, there's another example there. And additionally, while seeking liquidity mining alternatives is one of the DeFi 2.0 characteristics, it's not the only one. Another part of the emerging movement includes forks or iterations of the OG DeFi protocols, which a lot of people know those: Uniswap, Compound, Aave, MakerDAO, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's exciting time. I mean, the pace at the innovation. I mean, you think they're calling something OG DeFi protocols that literally came out like 18 months ago. So it's much faster than like the crypto markets. If you look at it from like a regulatory space, this is not stopping from regulations. It's just going. I just want to clarify just something when you say we have to separate layer one projects from DeFi. So layer one, think of that's the infrastructure. Now these DeFi protocols are on multiple layer ones. They're no longer confined to just building on Ethereum, because now, like you said, we have Solana, we have Avalanche, we're going to have Flare, we're going to have XRP Ledger, we're going to have Polkadot, there's going to be Cosmos, there's going to be Cardano, there's going to be Algorand. There's so many other layer one networks. I probably left a few out too. There's Terra. I mean, there's just so many that these protocols are able to move onto many of them. And I think that's really what we're starting to see, is the applications getting distributed over time to many of the layer ones. Ethereum used to have basically the walled garden where you had to build it on Ethereum or else it wasn't going to survive because there really was nothing else. Now we're kind of getting to a point where pre-ETH 2.0, the fees are so high there, it's almost like, well, maybe I'll just build over here on like Binance Smart Chain or some other, because there's so many other options that allow for the same EVM smart contracts. And Flare, Songbird are right up the alley for things like that. And I think this whole space, having many layer ones, I think is a good thing for these protocols, because now they have more communities to engage with. And the communities are having communities within the communities. And the DAOs are kind of a representation of that community within a community, right? They kind of act like these decentralized banks. That's kind of what Olympus DAO is, kind of what Klima is doing with carbon credits. And we're going to cover that in the future video, which I think is really fascinating. But let's cover the ending part of the article here, Patty.
Absolutely. So I definitely thought this was the ending there. So glad they had this because they give some examples. But Rari Capital offers isolated lending pools and recently unveiled a permissionless function allowing anyone to create said pools. And they crossed the 1 billion mark in TVL on October 12th. Rari is iterating on what Compound Finance did, essentially allowing users to fork the OG protocol's pools and customize them instead of limiting users to one pool. Abracadabra is experimenting with allowing users to deposit interest-bearing assets as collateral and to lend against those assets. This contrasts with what MakerDAO, which accepts some interest-bearing assets as collateral, namely LP tokens for popular Uniswap trading pairs. Additionally, these rapid developments are happening, while DeFi Pulse Index, which contains the tokens of Open Finance's pioneers like Aave, Uniswap, Compound, and Maker, is down more than 10% in the last 30 days, according to the project's website. New projects are shunning liquidity mining and shaping what's becoming DeFi 2.0 with their design decisions. Crypto is the land of FOMO, where disruptors get disrupted almost daily, but with a model of protocol-controlled value leaving liquidity mining behind, there's a real change afoot in DeFi. So this was a really great article and really helpful for us to like organize this video. So thank you to the Defiant. They also have a lot of really great stuff if people haven't checked out their website or YouTube channel before. Nikki, I just wanted to add with what you're saying, between the different layer ones and stuff. I mean, I always kind of go to like what Santiago Velez likes to say about these layer ones. They're almost like massive nation states. You could think of Flare as a country, the XRPL as a country. They all have different ways of, arriving at consensus and organizing themselves and expressing, their own value. And then on top of that, you have these dApps that are built on top. So that could be an NFT marketplace. It could be something like Flare Finance in the future, like they have listed here, Aave, Compound, Uniswap. They all have smaller communities that gather around those, that's built on top of these large layer ones in their communities. So it's almost like, looking at a country. You look at the US, we have this massive country. Some, all the base laws are done at the federal level. Then you move down to the state level where it's a smaller group of people. And then you even have a community level, like for your county or your local city or whatever, like that on top. I almost see that kind of organization and communities forming, all these different blockchains in the multi-chain world. So it's really interesting. And the other thing I want to say, last spring when me and you were talking about like multi-chain and no tribalism in crypto and stuff, we kind of were wondering what we would see with these projects and, how are they going to go multi-chain? How many are going to do it? SushiSwap basically has said, we're going to put SushiSwap on every single blockchain. I think they're on like 10 or 12 at this point, and they get more volume because of that than Uniswap does, which is basically, only within the Ethereum ecosystem. So, I think there's something to be said about taking brand names over to other blockchains and tying them in. People know what SushiSwap is, and it's helped them to amass a lot of value for their native token and a lot of volume and liquidity across, all their products on all the blockchains.
Yeah, no, you bring up some great points there with the nation state. So I would think in like 5-10 years from now, we're not going to have like an XRP community only. There'll be communities within communities. So you'll have XRP or Flare or Binance Smart Chain is the infrastructure. And then everything is built on top of those. And then on top of those. And then these DAOs interact with each other. So instead of just the community interacting with the protocol, now you have the community who governs the protocol or some kind of governance structure interacting with other protocols now. And Olympus has kind of been a trailblazer in that space to where they're making deals with other DAOs that both governance bodies have to vote on and then agree. And I think that's kind of where we're going to be pioneering, I think, in 2022 is really where these DAOs are going to be exploding. And I know a lot of people remember the DAO hack from 2017, 2018, and that kind of stalled it. But they were kind of too early at the time. I think you needed these layer ones to basically have some adoption, some user, some community and foundation, then get the DeFi 1.0 protocols out, which are all going to eventually become DAOs in their own way. I mean, this is where kind of all the protocols are going. The underlying blockchains probably won't be DAOs necessarily, but the projects on top are going to have to go that way because they have to decentralize themselves. But at the same time, you need governance with the decentralization. And that's where you get DAOs. And that brings those two together. So it's going to be really interesting. And things like Flare Finance are going to be a DAO on Flare Network. Probity is going to be a DAO on Flare Finance. And we'll probably have the same thing on the XRP ledger in due time too. So it's an exciting landscape here of DeFi 2.0. We're really starting to see, the community engagement and people engaging and not just, cold storing things and hoping for moon. It's actually interacting with the networks and these different protocols. We have VCs in there, and it's only a matter of time before institutional money starts flooding in too. So we have the opportunity before everybody else to be at the forefront. It's just a matter of keeping up with what's coming out, and it's starting to move at a fast pace. Like, this is an interesting stat here, Patty, how I know this is from October, but it says Aave, Uniswap, Compound Maker down 10% in 30 days compared to these new DeFi. So it's the disruptors are getting disrupted so rapidly. But at the same time, I don't think Aave, Uniswap, Compound Maker are going anywhere. Those are basically like just infrastructure components of the DeFi protocol ecosystem. So it's very exciting. And I think it's a good idea to understand these other protocols. We're not talking about investing. There's nothing here on financial advice on anything we said. It's just getting to know the landscape of how DeFi works. So then you understand how it's built on Flare and XRP and other ecosystems to be able to benefit from it. Because if you don't understand how it actually works or where it began, it's hard to then just come into it. So I think it takes a broad understanding of DeFi to really be able to benefit from it instead of just, trying to figure it out in just one shot.
Absolutely. And, while Olympus DAO may have the lead with what they're kind of doing and, what they've created, something super novel, it's still really early. I think one of the big issues with DAOs going forward is long term sustainability. Generally it's, maybe a smaller group of people that kickstart things. And then do people lose interest if those people want to move? And do something else with their life and not be a part of the DAO anymore. So, setting up the structure of these DAOs and stuff in a way that they can continue to evolve, and have positive impact on their protocols, even as people change over time, I think is going to be really important. And I think that'll be interesting to see as people come out with new models. I mean, we're in the middle of it. There's a bunch of people that have a lot of different ideas out there, and who knows which ideas are going to be the best ones or the best perceived. So this is going to continually happen, as the world keeps moving on. The only thing I know is that expect change. Things are going to keep changing, and they're probably going to keep changing quicker than you can keep up with. So sometimes it takes a little step back like this to kind of get where we're coming from. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is why, to understand that the space, it's moving so fast, but at the same time, these projects, say like XRP Ledger and Flare, Flare's been delayed. Doesn't mean it's falling behind. It's actually falling right into place with all these things that are being launched. So I think in from now to the next like 2 or 3 years, everything's kind of going to be established as an infrastructure in crypto, and then things will be built on top of that, and things will still be disrupted in the future. There's no like endpoint that we get to and it's like, oh, we're there. It's just going to continuously evolving and evolving and evolving, and some things will last long term and then become like pillars of infrastructure for the new financial system if they're able to have that, like you said, sustainability in the future. And we're just seeing the beginning of some of these things launching on top of things that were built, a year or two ago, but they can only launch because those other things already exist. So having Uniswap out there, having SushiSwap has allowed other protocols to launch on top of them using that liquidity in those protocols. So it's really fascinating how this is all being designed, but this is by far, I think, having the biggest impact on the cycle. And I know a lot of people will stare at charts and say this cycle, that. I don't know. I follow more of the fundamentals of what is going on in the market now. And this has been the biggest impact on crypto to date in this cycle. And there's like no question about it. It started at the beginning of the cycle and it's still impacting it right now. There's so much money staked. There's so much value locked. And there's so many people using these actual protocols, and it's only going to draw more people in. And it's going to be a consistent flywheel of just bringing people in. Now, they might bounce around from different protocol to protocol. You don't have to be completely tied to just that protocol and use. You could diversify, so you could be part of multiple communities. And I think that's a good thing here, is if you don't like how that community is working, you can move to this one. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be completely loyal. You have to balance investments, and I think with community. And I think eventually, as Raoul Pal has said, those things will begin to align. And that's what's, I think, the future's going to hold. So the nation state thing is a good analogy, Patty. I think to finish off with this, understand that there's underlying, like think of the layer ones like nation states, and then the things that are built on top, kind of like states and provinces or different counties and communities. So exciting times ahead, Patty. You have any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, who knows?
Oh,
Blockchain may, get
I have one.
overtaken by some new technology 20 years from now. So, for me, it's just seeing where things are going and trying to stay ahead of them as best I can. And I'd also add, sometimes it feels like maybe you've missed the boat on stuff. And, personally, I found like many times I've thought that, but, sometimes it's not always as true, always true. Things are moving fast. But it's not at an insane speed where if you look away for a single day, you have zero clue what's going on. So
No, good point. Let me just bring up two other points here. One is that the point of all this is there's massive amount of opportunities for all of us. That's the important thing to take away from this video, is that there's just, even though you might think there's only one opportunity now, there's so many coming in the future inside of the ecosystem of different networks themselves. So just being part of one community will give you access to a whole bunch of other communities which have more beneficial investment opportunities going forward. I do just want to throw out that Flare Finance does have the APY cloud, which does utilize a lot of these DeFi 2.0 functionalities in their own way. So just for those who are going to say, well, Flare Finance does all liquidity mining, how are they going to interact? How are they going to integrate DeFi 2.0 protocols? So basically, they have that with the APY cloud. And we've have some videos that we've covered with the APY cloud, and we get more information on it, we'll cover those. But basically, the APY fees that the utilization of the network from users to pay the governance staking pool, which is those who stake YFIN and YFlare. So instead of earning YFlare on YFIN, you're earning those tokens that are used in all the AMM decks, the loans that people pay fees on goes back to the governance staking pool to pay that yield. So that kind of eliminates the liquidity mining side from the staking. So I like the fact that Flare Finance has been thinking about this. That was 6 months ago, Patty, that they really came up with the APY cloud. So they're definitely at the forefront, and that's good to see moving forward. And the same goes for Probity, with what they're building there. It's not just like MakerDAO. Matt's trying to build something even bigger than that, and then stays up with innovation. So exciting what's being built on Flare going forward, knowing those two big projects are being built as kind of infrastructure for DeFi on Flare.
Absolutely. So with that, this is the DeFi Standard. I'm Patty XRP.
And I'm Mickey B. Fresh.
And we're out. See y'all.